How you holding up?
How much longer do I have to pretend that I'm dead?
Now, we all know Power love to throw us major twists and turns, and one of the biggest twists that they've given us so far in Power Book 2 Ghost is that Lauren is alive. At the end of Season 2, we saw Effie taking Lauren away, and where Jenny gave the news to Cooper Saxe that Lauren died in a car accident, but little did we know, she played Cooper Saxe, and she continues to do so in Season 3. And I'm going to come to some clues and foreshadows from Season 2 later in this video. But this episode titled Your Perception, Your Reality really does sum up the opening episode of Season 3. Not just when it comes to Lauren's survival, but there are several mind games, deception, and lies which continue to plague the Tejada family, Tariq's new family, and various other relationships that we see across episode 1. We were also given our first introduction to Noma, who made a statement kill in front of Brayden, Kane, and Tariq, to not only show she means business, but to make sure they stay in line when it comes to moving her product. The Tejadas are showing huge cracks after Zeke's death, but that's only one aspect. Diana seems like she's not feeling accepted. And in my opinion, it really does give us major clues that Diana will soon turn to her ways from Season 2. So could a new roommate Becca Weston be caught in the crossfire? Now, law enforcement also seems to be in the thick of the action a lot more this season compared to the last. But not just when it comes to the dynamics with Jenny Sullivan and Cooper Saxe. Jenny seems to be teaming up with Blanca Rodriguez, and Kevin Whitman will be a huge problem for Monet Tejada. So there really is a lot to unpack from the premiere. But to set the foundation, we actually have to start 3 months prior to the timeline. In Season 2, Episode 8, we saw Tariq St. Patrick come up with a plan to take Mecca's product. Kane said there was a way that they could up the stakes, and that was by stealing his most prized asset, this diamond ring. A diamond ring which he said was for Monet Tejada, but when this was stolen by the crew, it was given to Davis as a payment. Now, Davis gave this ring to one of his contacts to fence, and the ring ended up in an auction house, and this is where we are at the present day. But this is where we get our first introduction to Noma. Now, just some more background on who Noma is. She was orphaned in Nigeria and adopted by parents in the UK, who turned out to be criminals, and so she was born a gangster. She then finds her way to the US and meets Mecca, and her story unfolds from there, which is something we learn later on. Now, this ring actually belonged to Noma, and was a ring that Mecca gave to Noma, and this was sold for 5.5 million. And when this lucky or not so lucky lady was proposed to, we not only saw how ruthless of Noma was, but also Obi. Obi really brought a serious dark vibe to Season 3's premiere, and it is something that I was expecting as the seasons go on, the show to get that much more darker. But Noma is a character who showed us how ruthless she is off the bat when she refused to hand over the ring. Instead of just taking the ring, she cut the poor lady's hand off and put the ring back on her hand where she believes it belongs, and then the two were brutally murdered. But let's just catch up with the rest of the crew and we'll come back to Noma in just a moment. At Stansfield, Tariq and Effie were cleaning out the room that belongs to the Westons, and now in this conversation, Effie tells Tariq that he doesn't want to be known as just Tariq's girl at Stansfield, she's her own woman. So I really do think these are two characters who are better off as friends, rather than characters who are involved romantically, because now that they've got feelings involved, we're seeing how decisions are being made behind each other's backs. But in comes Becca Weston, who I was expecting to move to Stansfield, and it wasn't the warmest welcomes from Mrs. Weston, who blames Tariq St. Patrick for Brayden being expelled. And this was one of the themes of the episode, Tariq's past coming to haunt him in more ways than one. He'd also been assigned and needed the backing of Rashad Tate to keep his place at Stansfield, but there certainly was a price, because we all know Rashad Tate doesn't help for free. He says his campaign is tighter than he first expected, and he could use the skill set of someone like Tariq St. Patrick. And so could we see Tariq in a similar position Ghost once found himself, in the middle of politics? But with Tariq's position secure, for the time being anyway, we saw him back in class with a new professor, Professor Harper, a position which is cursed. Now they discuss greed and opportunity, and where we get the introduction to Salim, who seems like he may be Diana's new love interest, who also happens to find herself in Tariq's class, along with Effie and Becca Weston. After Brayden was expelled from Stansfield, he now finds himself working at his father's hedge fund, and you could see a clear divide. Trace is a lot more like his father, but Brayden is like his uncle Lucas Weston, who seems like a bit of a rebel and doesn't mind breaking the rules. He's also introduced to Kiki Travis, who at some point will be a love interest for Brayden. But I do maintain Brayden's choice in women isn't always the best in terms of a trust aspect, so Kiki is one to keep an eye on. But Wall Street is a place they're gonna end up moving weight, because that's what makes everybody tick in jobs like these that are long hours, filled with drugs, parties, and plenty of money. Trace Weston is also someone who could find himself in the middle once again, because he knows way too much. So Kiki and Trace Westons are one to watch, especially when Brayden and Tariq St. Patrick bring their organization over to Wall Street. Now the Tejadas find themselves in a bit of a difficult situation. Lorenzo was the man behind Zeke's death, Monet finds herself in a vulnerable state where she blames Diana, and there's just a lack of trust all around when it comes to this whole family, which is why I think Lorenzo feels it may be best if Diana does move to Stansfield, potentially just to separate her and Monet until the dust settles. But there are both pros and cons of sending Diana to Stansfield. Now, we also learn Mecca's penthouse was left to Monet after his death, and Monet made it clear it's going to go straight on the market. Now, at Mecca's apartment, Kane throws a party where they meet a potential new connect called Kai, but they couldn't come to an agreement, and this may be a battle we may see later on. But in comes Tariq and Brayden from the back entrance, because someone was watching Mecca's penthouse, and at this moment in time, we didn't know who. Later on it was revealed it was Detective Whitman, but that is something I'm going to discuss in a bit more detail later on. Now, Brayden wanted to continue doing business and talk about keeping their operation going, but this conversation was interrupted by a similar technique Kane pulled on the GTG and Mecca. The lights were out and Noma comes in with Rocky. She wants to get down to the bottom of Mecca's death because she was Mecca's fiancé and there was no chance in hell he would ever sell that ring. Funny that, because Mecca said he'd only loved Monet Tejada, but we also know he was a manipulative liar. Now, running it back to earlier in the video, I mentioned how Obi brings a real ruthless aura. He shows he doesn't take no shit or no foul language from Kane. But it was Rocky who name-dropped Noma, which was a cue to put a bullet in her, and that certainly made Kane, Brayden, and Tariq talk. And Noma says let's give them a chance, but she did call them eager little puppies. So I don't think she takes them seriously, not yet anyway, so they're gonna have to prove themselves. So back home, Kane gave the news that they found a new connect, or rather the connect found them, and they have enough product to take over the entire city. But Lorenzo's saying they need to take out Noma, and I agree with Kane. There is no way they can touch Noma. She's on a completely different level to them, which is why I do think Lorenzo's in for the biggest shock of his life when he does something stupid, because no doubt, he will. Now, with Monet Tejada, it's clear she wants out the game, but no Zeke means no exit strategy, so it doesn't matter what she wants. At this moment in time, it's all about survival in more ways than one for Monet, and law enforcement is something I will cover later on. But following Noma finding them, Kane seems like he's up to his usual tricks, similar to how he manipulated the situation between Tariq St. Patrick and Brayden in Season 2. He's now doing the same with Effie and Tariq. He tells Effie they're back in the game, something Tariq didn't tell her, which goes back to my point about how they keep things from each other and how they were better off remaining as friends, because when feelings get involved, it really does become a messy situation. Now, before Effie is brought in on the business, both Tariq St. Patrick and Brayden had a huge problem they needed to take care of: Sebastian Stern. We learned that him and Simon Stern had gone through a divorce, and the prenup means he's left with nothing, which is why he's dangerous, because he knows that Tariq St. Patrick was behind course correct and not Brayden. So we actually see Tariq coming up with a plan. Sebastian Stern could help him clean his money, because they will be moving a hell of a lot of it, but where Tariq tries to find other ways instead of killing, Brayden and Kane had other ideas. They were out to solve this problem through one way: murder. A murder which Brayden would have had to commit if Tariq hadn't got there first. But the reason why Tariq brutally stabbed Sebastian Stern was because of how he continued to poke him that he's exactly like his father. But when he says he owns Tariq St. Patrick, that's when it was game over for Bash. Now we then see Kane and Brayden, who were there to do the exact same thing, and they help Tariq with the body, and it's safe to say, Bash won't be missed. The following day is where we pick up with Tariq and Effie, who wants back in the game, and where they have a disagreement over Lauren. They both think she's dead, and so this is weighing heavy on Tariq's shoulders, and they really will be in the shock of their lives when they find out the truth, which I don't think is going to be a happy reunion. Now, Zeke's memorial at Stansfield was something that Diana organized. Maybe she feels a little guilty, even though she feels like it's not her fault, but you really get the sense that she doesn't belong with the Tejadas at this moment in time. So Salim may be a shoulder she lean on. Meanwhile, Tariq St. Patrick is the shoulder Monet seems to be leaning on after Tariq's speech. Tariq's speech was how Zeke was misunderstood through lies, and that's not how he should be defined, but also how Tariq was going through pretty much the same thing as Stansfield, but also how he was going to work hard to change everybody's opinion. Now, whether he succeeds, only time will tell, but for now, he needs to be there for Monet and the Tejadas, because there are definitely bigger issues at hand, and that's Zeke's death, and they have a hell of a lot of product that they need to move. So they need to put an infrastructure in place, which is what I assume they'll be doing over the next coming episode or two, and it's going to involve Kane, Effie, Tariq, Brayden, and maybe Diana and Becca Weston as well, because Becca Weston and Diana are now roommates. Now let's talk about law enforcement, because Tariq knows there was something fishy about Mecca's place, but it's also worth noting in this conversation, Tariq made it known that Davis is involved as much as him when it comes to Noma. We also have Davis trying to save Theo, who's suffering from hepatitis B and D, and he's on borrowed time, so he wants Saxe to get shit done with his case. Now what he didn't know was he was with Jenny Sullivan, a relationship which is somewhat turned. So let's just rewind it back to Season 2 for a moment. It was here where it was indirectly revealed to Jenny that the wire recording was played for Tariq. So since then, she knew she couldn't trust Saxe, which is why I believe she's kept Lauren in protection. But Jenny asks him to find out why Theo's case is so important to Davis, and this is something that could expose Davis even further. But I really do get the feeling that Jenny is using Cooper Saxe in season 3, similar to how Saxe was using her in season 2, except this time, Saxe really is getting played. Now, joining forces with Jenny Sullivan is a returning Blanca Rodriguez, and they're going to be forming a joint federal and local task force to go after Tariq St. Patrick, the Tejadas, and Davis Maclean. But she tells Whitman to back off because he's the one who's spying on Mecca's penthouse. He feels a sense of accountability and responsibility for Carrie's death, and so he wants to nail Monet Tejada, but he is clearly told, stand down. Now, I think we all know Kevin Whitman by now. He's similar to Greg Knox, and so he's going to prove to be a huge problem for the Tejadas, and someone who may need to be taken care of. Now, someone who wasn't taken care of was Lauren Baldwin. In the first major shock and twist of the season, we follow Jenny Sullivan to what seemed like her home, which is where we get our first glimpse of Lauren. She's pretending to be dead. And this is major, not just because of the twist, but the implications and what impact this could have on characters such as Tariq St. Patrick, the Tejadas, and Effie, as Jenny and Blanca Rodriguez build their RICO. We also know at some point Effie will be on the radar of law enforcement, and she was the one who tried to kill Lauren, so the implications for Effie will be huge, and one we need to keep an eye on. But that's a breakdown of the first episode of Power Book 2 Ghost Season 3, an episode which gave us our first look at Noma, death, complicated relationships, and a major twist with Lauren being alive. So what's next for the Tejadas, Tariq St. Patrick, and the rest of the crew, as law enforcement look to build a solid case? Drop all your thoughts and perspectives down below in the comment section, but as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.